Ivy did not leave as someone defeated. That was the first truth Steffi failed to fully grasp in the aftermath of her departure. To everyone watching from the outside, Ivy's exit looked like a fall, quiet, controlled, almost graceful. But beneath that surface, something far more dangerous had taken root. Ivy did not walk away from Forrester Creations empty-handed, nor did she carry only wounded pride. She carried memory, knowledge, and something sharper than both, resentment carefully sharpened into purpose. The moment the doors closed behind her, Ivy stopped being a former insider and became something else entirely, a strategist with nothing left to lose. At first, there was silence. Days passed with no sign of retaliation, no public statements, no dramatic moves. It was precisely that silence that made her absence feel unsettling, like the calm that lingers just before a storm breaks. Steffi tried to focus on stabilizing the company, on protecting Elektra, on managing the fallout from the missing diamonds. But somewhere in the back of her mind, Ivy's shadow remained, quiet, patient, waiting. And then, without warning, Ivy made her move. She did not go to the press. She did not attempt to destroy Forrester through scandal or rumor. Instead, she chose something far more calculated, far more devastating in the long term. She went to Katie Logan and Bill Spencer. The meeting itself was not loud or dramatic. It took place behind closed doors, in a space where power was measured not by volume, but by leverage. Katie, who had spent years navigating the delicate balance between loyalty and independence, was not easily swayed. Bill, on the other hand, understood opportunity the moment it appeared, and Ivy walked in carrying exactly that. She did not waste time with pleasantries. "I can give you something they don't even know they've lost yet," Ivy said, placing a sleek folder on the table between them. Her voice was calm, controlled, but there was an intensity beneath it that neither Katie nor Bill could ignore. Bill leaned back slightly, studying her. "That's a bold opening," he said. "You'll need more than mystery to convince me." Ivy smiled faintly, not warmly, but knowingly. "Unreleased jewelry designs. Eric's original sketches. Pieces no one has seen outside Forrester's inner circle." The room stilled. Katie's expression changed first. Shock, quickly masked by skepticism. "That's not possible," she said. "Those designs are protected." "They were," Ivy corrected. "Until I copied them." Bill's interest sharpened instantly. "You're telling me you're offering us proprietary designs from Forrester Creations?" "I'm offering you a way to surpass them," Ivy replied. There was no hesitation in her tone, no flicker of doubt. Katie felt a knot tighten in her chest. "This isn't just competition," she said quietly. "This is betrayal." Ivy met her gaze, without flinching. "They betrayed me first." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. And for a moment, Katie saw not just ambition in Ivy, but hurt, deep, unresolved, and dangerously motivating. Bill, however, saw something else. Leverage. "And what do you want in return?" he asked. Ivy's answer came, without delay. "A partnership. Resources. A platform. I want to build something that doesn't just rival Forrester. I want to dismantle it." The clarity of her ambition was startling. Katie shook her head slowly. "You're talking about destroying a legacy," she said. "A family." Ivy's expression hardened, just slightly. "They made their choice," she said. "Now I'm making mine." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of calculation. Bill's mind was already moving ahead, mapping possibilities, risks, outcomes. Katie, on the other hand, felt something far more complicated pulling at her, a sense that crossing this line would change everything in ways they could not undo. But temptation has a way of blurring boundaries. And Ivy had brought exactly what temptation needed: proof. When she opened the folder, the room shifted. Sketches, intricate, breathtaking, unmistakably Eric's work, spread across the table like fragments of something sacred that had been torn apart. Each design carried the signature elegance that had defined Forrester Creations for decades. Each one represented not just artistry, but identity. Katie felt her breath catch. "This is real," she whispered. Bill didn't respond immediately. He was already imagining the impact, what these designs could do in the right hands, under the right brand. The advantage they could create was not incremental. It was absolute. This would change the game, he said finally. Ivy's gaze didn't waver. That's the point. And just like that, the line between hesitation and action began to dissolve. When the deal was struck, it wasn't announced. There were no press releases, no public statements. Everything moved quietly, deliberately, beneath the surface. A new jewelry line began to take shape under the Logan brand, backed by Spencer Resources and fueled by Ivy's designs. It was only a matter of time before the impact reached Forrester. And when it did, it hit like a shockwave. The first signs were subtle. Rumors in industry circles, whispers about a new collection that was drawing attention even before its official launch. Then came the previews. And finally, the undeniable truth. The designs. Steffi saw them for the first time during a presentation that was meant to assess emerging competitors. But the moment the images appeared on the screen, everything else faded. She recognized them instantly. Not because she had seen those exact pieces before, but because she knew the language of them. The structure. The balance. The unmistakable signature that belonged to Eric. Her heart dropped. "That's impossible," she said under her breath. But it wasn't. Across the table, Carter's expression darkened. "Those are ours," he said quietly. The room erupted into confusion, questions overlapping, disbelief turning into something sharper. Accusations began to surface, though no one yet knew where to direct them. Steffi didn't speak again. Because deep down she already knew.
Ivy.
The realization hit her with a force that felt almost physical. This wasn't just retaliation. It wasn't even just competition. It was war. And not the kind fought through marketing campaigns or seasonal releases. This was personal, strategic, designed to strike at the very core of what Forrester represented. When Elektra saw the designs, her reaction was different. Not shock, not confusion, but something closer to disgust. "She actually did this?" Elektra said, her voice tight with emotion. "She took something that didn't belong to her and handed it over like it was nothing?" There was no affection left in her tone when she spoke of Ivy. Only rejection. For Elektra, the betrayal cut deeper than professional rivalry. It was familial, personal. A line that, once crossed, could never be redrawn. "She's not just attacking the company," Elektra continued. "She's tearing apart everything we stand for." Steffi looked at her, seeing the conflict etched across her face, the pain of recognizing that someone you once trusted was capable of something unforgivable. And in that moment, Steffi felt something shift within herself as well. Because this wasn't just about defending a brand anymore. It was about defending identity, legacy, family. The battle lines were no longer blurred. They were drawn.
Clear. Sharp.
Irreversible. On one side stood Forrester Creations, wounded but standing, fighting to protect what had been built over generations. On the other stood Ivy, backed by Logan and Spencer Power, armed not just with talent, but with intimate knowledge of her former home. And between them, a war was unfolding that would not end cleanly. Because this kind of conflict never does. It doesn't resolve through compromise. It doesn't fade with time. It escalates. It consumes. And as the first official launch of the Logan jewelry line approached, one thing became undeniable to everyone involved. This was no longer business. This was vengeance dressed in elegance. And it would not stop until one side was left with nothing. The launch night did not begin with celebration. It began with tension, thick, unspoken, threading through every polished surface and carefully rehearsed smile. Forrester Creations had hosted countless events before, evenings defined by elegance and control, where every detail reflected confidence. But this time, something was different. Beneath the glittering lights and curated displays, there was a quiet awareness that the world was watching not for brilliance, but for weakness. Steffi stood at the center of it all, composed as ever, her presence commanding yet inwardly fractured. She had insisted on moving forward with their own showcase despite the storm gathering around them. To retreat now would be an admission, of fear, of vulnerability, of defeat. And Steffi Forrester did not concede easily. Yet even she could not ignore the shift. Guests arrived not just with admiration, but with curiosity sharpened by rumor. Industry insiders exchanged glances, their conversations dipped in speculation. Every introduction carried an undercurrent. How would Forrester respond to the undeniable emergence of a rival collection that already bore whispers of superiority? Across the city, at nearly the same hour, another event unfolded. Ivy stood beneath a different set of lights, cooler, sharper, less nostalgic, and far more forward-looking. The Logan Jewelry launch was not built on legacy, it was built on disruption. Bill Spencer had ensured that the event drew attention from every corner of the industry, while Katie, poised yet visibly conflicted, stood as the face of a brand stepping into dangerous territory. And Ivy did not hide. She welcomed the attention, the scrutiny, the quiet shock rippling through those who recognized the unmistakable DNA of Forrester in the pieces now displayed under another name. This was not subtle. This was a declaration. Back at Forrester, the first blow landed not through confrontation, but through comparison. Images from the Logan event began circulating almost instantly, on screens, on phones, whispered between guests who tried, unsuccessfully, to keep their reactions contained. Elektra saw them first. At a distance, she could have dismissed them, claimed coincidence, overlap, shared inspiration. But up close there was no denying it. The craftsmanship, the structure, even the daring restraint in certain designs, it all echoed something deeply familiar. Her chest tightened. She didn't just take inspiration, Elektra said, her voice low but trembling. She took identity. Steffi followed her gaze, and for a brief moment, something flickered across her face. Not anger, not shock, but something colder. Recognition. And then, resolve. Then we remind them what real identity looks like, Steffi replied. But even as she said it, she knew this was no longer about aesthetics or branding. It was about perception. And perception was already shifting. The following days unfolded with brutal efficiency. Reviews emerged, cautious at first, then increasingly bold. Critics praised the Logan line for its unexpected sophistication, its fearless reinterpretation of classic luxury, its refined boldness that challenges established norms. They did not explicitly accuse Forrester of losing its edge, but they didn't need to. The implication was enough. Inside Forrester Creations, pressure mounted. The board, already unsettled by the missing diamonds, now faced a second crisis, one that struck at the heart of their creative authority. Questions turned sharper. Doubts grew louder. And Steffi found herself standing not just as a leader, but as a defendant in a trial where the verdict seemed to be forming long before the evidence was fully examined. Carter confronted her again, this time with less patience. "This isn't just coincidence anymore," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Those designs, Steffi, they're too close. If this turns into a legal battle, it will," she interrupted. He paused. "You sound certain." "I am." Because now, Steffi understood something she hadn't allowed herself to fully accept before. Ivy hadn't just taken designs. She had taken time. She had positioned herself ahead of them, releasing what Forrester hadn't yet revealed, forcing them into a reactive position. It was a strategic strike, one that ensured Forrester would always appear one step behind, even if the truth was the opposite. And that was the most dangerous part. Because in business, perception often becomes reality. Elektra felt that reality closing in on her from all sides. Every meeting, every presentation, every quiet conversation seemed to circle back to the same unspoken question. Was she capable of leading in a moment like this? Or had her promotion only accelerated the company's vulnerability? She tried to push it aside, to focus on the work, on proving herself through action. But the weight of expectation, combined with the shadow of Ivy's betrayal, began to wear down her confidence. One evening, long after most of the building had emptied, Elektra remained in the design studio, surrounded by sketches that now felt insufficient. Not because they lacked quality, but because they no longer felt safe. Every idea she touched seemed vulnerable to comparison, to accusation, to doubt. She stared at a blank page, her hand frozen above it. "What if I'm not enough?" she whispered, the question slipping out before she could stop it. She didn't hear Steffi approach, but she felt her presence. "You don't get to ask that question," Steffi said quietly. Electra looked up, startled. "Why not? Everyone else is." Steffi stepped closer, her expression firm but not unkind. "Because if you start believing it, they've already won." Electra let out a bitter laugh. "They might have already." "No," Steffi said more sharply now. "They've disrupted us. They've challenged us. But they haven't defeated us. Not yet." Electra held her gaze, searching for certainty, and finding something more complicated. Determination, mixed with doubt, mixed with something that looked dangerously close to fear. "What if we can't recover from this?" Electra asked. Steffi didn't answer immediately, because for the first time the question didn't feel hypothetical. "It depends," she said finally, "on whether we're willing to stop playing by the rules they've already broken." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Electra frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Steffi said slowly, "we don't just defend ourselves. We expose them." And with that, the direction of the war shifted. Because Steffi was no longer thinking about survival. She was thinking about strategy, about turning Ivy's greatest strength, her knowledge of Forrester, into her greatest vulnerability. The investigation into Melissa Dillon resurfaced with renewed urgency. What had once seemed like a contained issue now revealed itself as a critical piece of a much larger puzzle. If Ivy had orchestrated access to internal systems before her departure, then the theft of designs and the disappearance of the diamonds might not be separate incidents at all. They might be connected. And if they were connected, then there was a chance, however small, that proof existed. Steffi worked in silence, retracing every step, every interaction, every irregularity. Carter, though still cautious, began to see the pattern forming. The inconsistencies were no longer isolated. They aligned, pointing toward a deliberate manipulation of internal processes. And at the center of it all, Ivy. But proving it would require more than suspicion. It would require something undeniable. Something that could not be dismissed, spun, or buried. Meanwhile, across the divide, Ivy was not unaware of the pressure building on the other side. In fact, she counted on it. Success had come quickly, but she understood that momentum was fragile. The moment Forrester found its footing, the balance could shift again. So she moved forward, pushing harder, faster, ensuring that every new release, every public appearance, reinforced the narrative she had begun to shape. She told herself it was about justice, about reclaiming what had been denied to her. But late at night, when the noise faded and the adrenaline subsided, another truth surfaced, quieter, more unsettling. This wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure they felt the loss she had felt. And that needed was becoming something she could no longer fully control. The collision between the two sides was inevitable. And it came sooner than anyone expected. The legal notice arrived on a gray morning, stark and uncompromising. Forrester Creations formally accused the Logan brand of intellectual property theft, citing substantial evidence of design replication and unauthorized use of proprietary materials. It was the first direct strike.
Public.
Unavoidable. The industry reacted instantly. Media outlets picked up the story within hours, framing it not just as a legal dispute, but as a dramatic escalation in a rivalry that had already captured widespread attention. Inside Forrester, the mood shifted from defensive to focused. This was no longer about speculation. It was about proof. And across the city, as Ivy read the notice, her expression did not change. But something in her eyes hardened. "They're finally fighting back," Bill observed, watching her carefully. Ivy set the document down, her movements deliberate. "Good," she said. Katie frowned. "Good? Ivy, this could get messy. If they have evidence, they don't have enough," Ivy interrupted. But even as she said it, A flicker of uncertainty passed through her. Because somewhere, deep beneath her confidence, she understood a truth she could not ignore. If Steffi had come this far, she wasn't guessing anymore. She was closing in. And as both sides prepared for what would come next, one thing became clear to everyone involved. This war had passed the point of no return. There would be no quiet resolution. No mutual understanding. Only revelation. And whoever controlled